Well, just to be practical, I think the shooting war is back on because of the Strait. From everything we're hearing in the last hour or two, admittedly sketchy, the U.S. Put destroyers or other naval vessels into the Strait against Iran's warnings, and it sounds like the shooting has started again. And if this is true, we are on a path of utter calamity. I think whatever the legalities, the U.S. put a blockade on Iran, which was utterly reckless because the Strait was to be opened in a ceasefire that immediately was violated by Israel. And then when Iran retaliated, the United States put a blockade on that it did not remove even after Iran said that it would reopen the Strait. All of this is mind-boggling. Basically, the United States could not take yes for an answer for a ceasefire and opening the Strait. And it seems that the Strait is closed now, according to the latest that I'm reading, just on the latest messaging, the Iranians announced a complete closure, and there are multiple reports of new missile fire taking place in the Gulf region, hitting vessels and attacking the Emirates. So it seems that we're back to war.
Al Jazeera has two eyewitnesses to Iranian missiles striking an American ship, even though the American, the Defense Department, CENTCOM, the people there in the Middle East, have denied it. Surely this is going to drive, you understand this better than anybody, drive the price of oil and other essentials way up.
If we go back to a full war, and it seems at this moment hard to believe that we will not be in a full war even today, because it doesn't seem like this is a little accidental skirmish. It seems like the United States, and especially Israel, are determined to go back to war. This will absolutely be catastrophic for the world economy. We are not talking about a temporary closure of shipping of oil and gas. If we go back to war, we're talking about the destruction of the physical infrastructure in this central region of the world for hydrocarbons and for the products that they produce. So we're talking about physical destruction that would not be brought back online for years to come, not tactical maneuvers or games of chicken over days or weeks. We're talking about a catastrophe that would stretch for years. Seems like Trump is walking into this. This is what Israel wants. Trump does what Israel wants. Trump does not listen to anyone else anywhere other than Netanyahu. We can't quite understand why, but this seems to be what we're walking into. I hope all these reports are wrong, but there are too many of them in the last couple of hours.
Tell us about oil. Is it a function of supply and demand, or is it a function of what speculators think it will cost in a week or a month or a year?
It's a little bit about spot supply and demand, to be sure. It's also within the bounds of storage. Some speculation. You can speculate about shortages in the future up to the point that you can store that oil. Or if you think that the spigot's going to be wide open in the future, you can reduce your stored supplies. But that's limited. What we are seeing right now with the price of oil having risen from around $65 to $70 a barrel, at the so-called Brent price, to around $115 a barrel. This is from just before the war started at the end of February until today, is a spot shortage that is very intense. The strait has been closed, production has been shut in, only a very small amount of oil has gone through. There were stocks that could be run down, and they have been run down. And from all reports that we're seeing around the world, there are physical shortages and rising prices in the context of those physical shortages of diesel, physical shortages of aviation fuel, airlines cutting flights because they can't get the aviation fuel. So this sends the prices up. We're not seeing primarily speculation. We're seeing a response to physical shortages, which could become dramatically worse. The flow is already low, but if the prospect is that it's not going to be turned on through a reopening or negotiations, then we will see stocking up desperately for any kind of reserves that can be built, and that will drive the price of oil to $150 a barrel, or by some estimates, $200 a barrel. Of course, all depends on separating a lot of rumors from fact and how much destruction would actually take place if there is a reversion to war. A message that I have just seen says the Mossad is urging the Israeli government to resume a full-fledged war on Iran. Now, again, these are rumors, I'm sorry to say, because they're just coming this moment, but Mossad and the CIA have so much role in determining policy that a message like that is, if true, is tantamount to a restoration of war. And then comes the question that we've been asking for weeks. The presumption, I think, of most independent observers is that if this war resumes, Iran maintains extensive retaliatory capacity, drones and missiles. And it does not take that many of them to destroy the physical infrastructure of the Gulf region. And we've been discussing for weeks that some of the facilities, especially the desalination plants, which keep people alive, but also the oil and the gas fields, the refineries, the pipelines, the ports, can all be destroyed, because the idea that they are somehow protected by an iron dome is a fiction. There just are not enough anti-missile systems, and they're not as effective as is advertised in order to protect against a large counterattack by the Iranians. That's the presumption of most independent military observers. It sounds credible to me. This sounds like an accurate assessment. Maybe the US and Israeli intelligence know something different, but boy, they have not shown any real intelligence in any of this. So the idea that they must know, I think, is false. This is an action driven, I think, by ignorant leaders and maybe the bloviations of their intelligence agencies, especially Mossad. But I don't see any real evidence that that they know what they're talking about in the capacity to shut down an Iranian retaliation.
The leak that you just reported from Mossad is consistent with what the White House leaked last week, which is that Mrs. Adelson and her colleagues were talking to the president and putting extensive pressure on him to counter the mild resistance of his military leadership.
Well, it makes sense. He has done whatever Israel has asked all along. Israel is basically a war state, in a perpetual state of war. They believe that Iran is the last obstacle to Israel becoming the great power of the Middle East. It's mind-boggling, the hubris and the ruthlessness of it. And I think that it's going to prove deadly for Israel. But this is the belief, and Trump goes along with this for whatever reason, reasons we can't really understand because they don't make sense. And of course, they could be about money, they could be about donors, they could be about blackmail, they could be about 1,000 things that we just don't know.
Let's talk about negotiation. If a basic presumption of negotiation is the sovereign integrity of the country with which you're negotiating, and if a realistic assumption is that that country is entitled to protect its borders, what do these negotiators have in common? What common belief do they have? Iran wants to be left alone and wants the sanctions removed. Israel wants Iran decimated. The United States wants whatever Israel wants.
Yes. When the ceasefire went into effect, there was this fleeting moment of Trump posting on Truth Social that Iran's 10-point plan was a basis for negotiation.
Right.
That was the last we ever heard of that, because we don't have a mature government. We don't have a government in which words mean anything, not the president's words or anybody else's words. And we don't have a real diplomatic process where you would say, well, now we sit down and we negotiate on this basis. It never happened. That was one reference, and then it never reappeared. The Iranians put forward a similar set of positions a couple of days ago in 14 points. I haven't seen a complete concordance of the 10 and the 14, but from what I can gather, they're basically the same, very similar, I should say. And there was no organized response to that from the United States. These are not negotiations. They never have been negotiations. You don't send Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to negotiate. This is ridiculous. It's without any rational process, and there hasn't been one. And every time one looks at the situation as it gets more and more dire, it seems less and less rational. And the closer one looks at all of this, I think the fair thing to say is the United States government is in the hands of a few people who have grabbed power. The congressional Republican leadership is absolutely as if they don't exist, as if they don't understand anything about their constitutional responsibility. They have just completely, totally disappeared, except on the occasional vote when they say we don't want to have anything to do with any of these decisions. And we don't hear any coherence from any senior government official. Our entire political life revolves around Truth Social posts. And this seems to be an accurate reflection of how our government works right now. And so I think none of this makes sense in terms of American interests, in terms of military capacity, in terms of likely consequences. And if what is happening right now, by report, turns out to be the case, if we go back to a full war, again, lots of ifs there, I apologize, because I think this is a crucial moment. And so I want to state the conditional.
Right.
If we go back to a full shooting war, we will look back at these next 2 weeks as among the most consequential in years or decades, because a lot will be destroyed that will not be rebuilt anytime soon.
Last week, it's unclear to me who called whom. President Putin had a phone call with President Trump, and then he had a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. The Russian readout of the Putin-Trump conversation was that President Putin was friendly but candid and direct. What do you think President Putin said, and what can he do? What can Russia do? I'll add to that. What can Russia and China do? China has more to lose here to prevent a resumption of the attempts to destroy Iran.
The readout of that call is that President Putin was very clear to President Trump: do not restart a war. It will be a grave mistake. It will be a devastating mistake. Iran has the capacity to respond, and Iran has backing from Russia and from other countries as well. Do not do this. Negotiate and end this war. I think that was the unequivocal message of President Putin. And I think it was a correct message and a credible message, and it's the one that Trump should heed. And this is the same message coming from China. Again, if this were even a remotely rational process, we would not even be discussing these rumors because they would be dismissed as preposterous. There is no rational basis for restarting the war with Iran, because the consequences are very likely to be devastating if that happens. And that's what President Putin said to President Trump. It was good advice. I hope that he heard it and heeded it, and that today's news turns out to be not the case. But I fear that there's too much of it now coming, too many missiles being sent, too many videos being posted in the last hour to believe that this is just disinformation or just a correctable skirmish. It looks like something more than that.
What do you think President Putin said to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and do the Russians have leverage with the Israelis?
Well, the one that has leverage with the Israelis, if we chose to use it, is the United States. The U.S. is the military supplier and is the financier and is the diplomatic protector of Israel. If Trump chose to turn off an attack and told Israel to stand down, Israel would stand down. That happened briefly when that ceasefire, which failed in the first moments because Netanyahu violated it in the first moments, was followed up by the United States telling Israel, stop what you're doing. That lasted a very short period of time. Israel seems to have almost unlimited power over the United States government, or at least I should say over Donald Trump. But the U.S. could close this down. I don't think Putin's leverage is directly with Israel. Putin, I think, is giving sound advice, which is that a resumption of a shooting war will be disastrous. Not especially for Russia, by the way, which has already seen a massive increase of its oil sales because the prices have soared, and that will continue, and Russian production will increase, and even the United States, because we're so incoherent, puts on sanctions against Russian oil, takes them off. It took them off because the U.S. was trying to stop the soaring oil prices worldwide, and it apparently has led Japan to become a renewed customer of Russia. It's all bizarre from an American point of view. Of course, I don't believe in these sanctions at all, but how incoherent all of this is. So the real leverage is the United States. And the real question is, do we have a president of the United States, or essentially somebody who's a vassal of the Israeli prime minister? We don't know, but we're finding out right now.
The clips we just saw, Chris, can you put them up again? This is what Iranian television is saying were the missiles that struck or were aimed at U.S. ships. We don't see where they landed, of course. Yep. That's where.
But if they're claiming it, that's consistent with all the reports that we're hearing. Otherwise, they would be denying it.
Correct.
So if they are claiming that they're shooting at Russian ships, we're back at war.
Yeah. Who wins the waiting game, Jeff?
Well, the waiting game was a loser for everybody because the noose around the neck of the world economy was tightening. The oil prices were rising. When the ceasefire was announced, the oil prices went down to around $90 a barrel. And then as it became clear that the ceasefire was very fragile, they went to 95, then they went to 100. And then when the U.S. put on the blockade, which was a blockade of a blockade, something unimaginable that nobody could figure out, the oil prices continued to march upward because the shortages of flow of oil and gas intensified. And the stocks, the reserves, were run down in Asia especially, but elsewhere as well. And so the waiting game was a losing game. Something had to give. Either Trump, something maybe he's incapable of doing, would have had to negotiate in a serious way, not with the stupid threats and bluffs and all the rest, but actually negotiate on Iran's points as he said he would, but then failed to do, or we would revert to what seems to be happening now. So the waiting game was a losing game. It just meant a ever tightening noose on the world economy, and everybody felt it, and it was known and discussed daily how the situation was untenable. So it wasn't just waiting. It was an asphyxiation taking place, a shortage of oil and gas and urea, fertilizers, and many other vital petrochemical products. And so it was untenable. And it's breaking now.
I have to correct what I said earlier. Iran State Television said what we just saw, Chris, if you want to put them up again, were warning shots fired at U.S. destroyers. It says it fired missiles, rockets, and drones. So we don't know if anything was hit. If there were warning shots, they were not intended to reach the target, but just...
Well, this is very interesting, Judge, because obviously Trump claimed we're sending our Navy into the Strait, and Iran said, no, you're not. Trump, in his way, utterly without negotiation, without any sense, declared the humanitarian mission of sending the U.S. military into the Strait. The Iranians said no. Apparently, of course, the U.S. military or Navy has tried warning shots are fired. Again, everything I've been saying is if we are back to a shooting war, that's one thing. If Trump says, well, I tried that gambit, we're pulling back, then we just sit at the brink. So this is really why these moments and these days are so decisive, and why I've said if 100 times, and I apologize, I'll say it one more time. It all depends. We have a clear choice. Trump can stop the war by himself, because essentially he started it by himself, of course, with the con job that Netanyahu and Mossad gave to him. But he can stop the war by himself as well and save his political fate, save the US economy, and save the world economy. Or he can double down on his threats and his blusters and his attacks and follow Israel and destroy the world economy. And we're in those minutes of suspense right now. Again, rational people would have no doubt. Of course he won't follow through. It's nuts. But we don't see that rationality.